Welcome, Dana. Dana is one of my beautiful lady who's going to be sharing her story in our special month to honour the International Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Day, which is happening on Friday, the 15th of October. So every Tuesday throughout October, I'm going to be interviewing some beautiful ladies who are sharing their stories of loss. And Dana is our first one. We are pre-recording, but you'll be seeing this on Tuesday, the 5th of October. So I'm going to just share a little bit before I let Dana tell her story. So thank you for joining us, Dana.
Thank you.
She is a vocational education trainer and assessor in aviation and tourism and a teacher aide. She's been married for 3.5 years to an amazing husband and is a mother to 2 children, 1 angel baby girl and 1 boy earthside and 1 fur baby. She lived overseas for 7 years and traveled the world to over 85 countries. She's passionate about sharing what she's learned through not just the loss of her baby girl, Aria, but of her loss of her mother. So she's grateful for the opportunity to share her story with us today. So thank you so much for joining us.
That's all right.
Let's start by you sharing your story. Like, how is it that I'm interviewing you here today?
It probably starts with 2012. 2012, I was living overseas already for 5 years, and I came home. I would always come home on holiday to see my mum and dad and my brothers and the family. And I was home on just a normal catch-up. And while I was there, my mum had a normal breast screening. She just had the breast screening just before I arrived back home. And she said to me that there was a biopsy being done, but no problems. So I said, no problems. Arrived home, and my mum was and is like the most beautiful, loving woman. So strong, does everything for us, and was a pillar of strength, never showed us at all there would be a worry. So we didn't think anything of it. Yeah. In the time I was home, in the first week of it, my mum was diagnosed with breast cancer. Not aware that she did have a lump in her breast.
Okay.
And it was diagnosed as a rare form of breast cancer, that in the 2 weeks I was home for the holidays, she'd had already a double mastectomy, and it had reached her lymph nodes.
That's fast.
It was very fast, especially when it was just a normal checkup. There wasn't any, and there isn't any history in our family of cancer. So in my time of being around on the holidays here, I was able to support my mom and be her rock, but she never at all faltered. She knew this is what needs to be done.
Yeah. And
she knew from there she would be needing radiation and chemotherapy.
Yeah.
So in 2012, I was very fortunate. I was working for an airline. So I was able to go back overseas where I was living, and my bosses allowed me to come home every 3 weeks for a few days to be home for my mom's chemotherapy.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So radiation first occurred. My dad took my mom every day. And then after that, I was able to come back and come for her 6 treatments of chemotherapy. And I'd be home, arrive on a Friday, and go back overseas on the Monday.
Wow.
Every time we came to the hospital, I looked like I was the sick patient because I was so tired from the flights.
Yeah, I bet.
And still my mom, through the chemotherapy, never at all showed any weakness, and difference, just knew this is what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Once she finished the radiation and chemotherapy, she was then in remission and was put on chemo tablets for the next 5 years. After the 5 years from there, you're completely, in a sense, free.
Yeah.
In that time, I, of course, was still living overseas, and I came back in the end of 2014, back to be with my mum, my dad, my brothers, my family.
Yeah.
In that time, the start of 2015, I actually met my husband, or husband-to-be, and my mum was completely supportive, because that means I'd be staying in Australia.
Yeah.
For her, she thought it was the best thing ever.
I bet.
And at the same time, she just loved that I was happy that I met my one.
Yeah.
Then from there, in the end of 2017, it'd been literally coming up to my mum's 5-year remission, still on the chemo tablets, still seeing the oncologist regularly to check up and everything. She started having vision problems, that she noticed one of her eyes that there was vision happening, unfortunately. And she went to the doctor, who then went back to her oncologist and had a scan and found out that the chemo hadn't been working and the cancer has spread. So this was 2017. She knew that we would have to start the journey more, that we'd have to continue with radiation and chemotherapy. She, again, never faltered, just thought, I've got to do this, and was so strong for my brothers, my dad, ourselves. At the same time, my mum was going through this. I had to have endometrioma surgery for one time, and then the second time. And in hospital, I still remember so beautifully, my mum would literally come in the morning to see me after the surgery, and I was in there for a few days. She would then go to her chemotherapy appointment, different hospital, and then come back to me in the afternoon to be with me. Like, that was my mum.
That's devotion.
She completely was. She was my best friend, my everything, the person you can just give everything to, and she'll just take it and just love you and support you. So I had all that. She was making sure she was with me all the way. And then April 2018, Craig and myself got married, which was fantastic. And my mum made sure, even through all the appointments coming up to the wedding, my mum was she was going to chemotherapy every day.
Wow.
And then for 3 weeks, and then would have a week off and then start again each month. Coming up to my wedding day, every appointment I needed to go to or wanted to go to, my mum made sure she could go. My dad would take her, and she wasn't able to drive if she wasn't feeling well, but she was at everything in mind. She, no matter what, made sure she was there for me, which was just, that was my mum.
Yeah.
My wedding itself, my mum looked beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But she was, of course, at the same time needing to rest. But she made sure on the day, it was just my day, that she just stood strong and she stayed the whole day, which was just fabulous.
So amazing.
And it was really nice. Craig and myself were able to speak about my mum in our wedding speech to show how much we appreciated her. To talk about how much she gives to our family and how much she is the rock. And that even though what she's going through, she's never a person to ask people to feel sorry for her. She never complained. She just knew this is what needs to be done. After our wedding, we had for a couple of months, Mum was having small falls, but was going through chemotherapy. So we understood that this takes a toll on your body for such a long period of time. And then in the first week of September, my mum asked my dad to take her to hospital because she realised her legs were unfortunately not working as well, and she was very worried. So my dad took her to hospital, and she was checked in for the night, and I arrived after work to my mum to see how she was. And my mum, still so strong, just said, there's something wrong. We need to see what we can do. What will the oncologist do, etc. So in that week, my mum got transferred to the hospital where my oncologist works, also her oncologist works. And they did all the tests. And I asked my mum to be in the appointment when they tell you what the results are and why this is happening. As she's been doing chemotherapy, she's been doing everything. That was probably one of the hardest conversations to be part of, because it was my mum, my dad, and myself. And beautiful doctor we've known a long time. But had told my mum that she's been doing everything right. They can treat the cancer, but it's so aggressive they won't be able to cure it. So they would treat it so she can have longer here. And to be part of that conversation, to try and just take that burden away from your mum, it's just so hard because she was so strong. She didn't break. She just said, I just remember her just going like, bugger. And that was it. Like, just, okay, what do I need to do?
Yeah.
And the doctor said, we'll need to continue doing chemo, as the reason why is it spread further through your body. So from there, that same week that my mum was told, or our family was told the worst news, Craig and myself were able to give a little bit of hope, a little bit of happiness into our family. Craig and I had been trying, and because I had endometriosis, I had to have the second surgery to hope my chances for fertility.
Yep.
So I'd had the second surgery, I'd waited, and then we started trying for our family.
Yeah.
So that same week that my mum was in hospital, I literally found out that we were pregnant. And, you know, my mum was all about family, but the best thing for her was being a grandmother. She just loved her grandchildren. My older brother had two children already, and she knew we were trying. You know, she was my best friend. I told her everything.
Yeah.
So she was just waiting for the news. So I was able to, I said to her that weekend that Craig and myself will come in and we've got news for you. I know in Children to Live, she knew what that meant. Yeah. And it just was able to go from my mum's mind to switch to go, there is some happiness in the world.
Yeah.
So that weekend, Craig and I were able to come in, and we were only at that stage, like literally 4 to 5 weeks pregnant.
Yeah.
And we were able to tell my mum that we were pregnant. And it was the best news for my family to have a little bit of happiness in this time.
Yeah.
And my mum was then just be able to focus on my pregnancy, which was such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
She was still having every day chemotherapy and physio for her legs.
Okay.
And we just basically plodded along. Each day, my dad was there the whole day. And then after work, I would come, or my brothers would come, or my husband would come to be with mum. Yeah. So we made sure that mum was never alone. And on weekends, all of us as family and the grandchildren would be able to come up and be able to be with mum, which was exactly what my mum wanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Through October, we had my little brother's birthday and my birthday, and we celebrated in the hospital, but that's just what you did. And we were able to print out a little picture of the sonogram of our little one for mum to have in the room. Yeah. And Craig and myself had nicknamed our little one Jelly Bean. Yeah. So Craig had printed out like a big picture of a jelly bean in a cartoon form, so mum could have that there. So whenever doctors walked in, they could ask her about it, or she could talk about it. Yeah. Gave her a little bit of happiness.
And a good distraction.
The whole time. Oh, sorry.
A good distraction.
Yes. The best distraction. I never realized until when it all happens in the same time that it is nice to have a little bit of happiness in the family. I'd always ask my mum what I was having because I hadn't found out. And my mum said, well, we were having a baby girl. And Craig and me were hoping for a baby girl, but we, of course, didn't know. And then around the time of I was 8 to 10 weeks or 8 to 12 weeks pregnant, mum's health was deteriorating. So I hadn't had a chance to tell the other family members. Of course, immediate family knew of Craig's and my own, but not aunties and uncles, etc. Except for my mum's sister came up from Sydney, who she was very close with, and we were able to spread the news that way. The end of October 2018, the oncologist came back and said to my mum that we've done everything, you've done everything. It's now time to let your body breathe. The chemotherapy is not slowing it down. It's just spreading. Yeah. And my mum and my dad spoke, and then my 2 brothers and myself were called in to talk to mum. And my mum, again, selfless, asked us permission, could she stop chemotherapy? even though we knew it wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
That was the hardest thing to know, definitely at that time, that my mom wasn't going to be with me when I had the little one. And we didn't know how much time we had at that stage.
Yeah.
It was the right decision to give my mum and her body a little bit of time to breathe. But
Yeah.
we didn't realize after that how quickly things were going to happen.
Yeah.
So at the end of October, my dad, myself, my brothers, we were trying to see if mum could have palliative care back at home.
No.
But as it progressed so fast through her body, we didn't get the opportunity. So instead, my mum decided to move to palliative care at the hospital that's just around the corner from my parents' house, literally 5 minutes. And she left the hospital and arrived, it was Monday the 5th of November, and she arrived at palliative care, and they were the most beautiful staff members, so respectful. It was so dignified. And at the same time, it was very surreal. Because at that time I would have been, I think 14, I would have been around 14 weeks pregnant.
Yeah.
And in palliative care, it's just about making sure the person's comfortable.
Yeah.
So we arrived on Monday the 5th, and my mum that day, able to eat, everything like that. But at this time we were feeding her. Then on the Tuesday, I moved back into my parents' house. So because it was so close, just around the corner.
Yeah.
And on the Tuesday, my mum went to sleep, and realistically for the next few days woke up a couple of times, but that was it for us. We didn't, because it happened so quickly, we didn't have a lot of conversations about future.
Yeah.
And that is really, one, I don't, like, for my mum, I think that's really important because she was so strong. She fell asleep and it was peaceful. But
yeah,
for us, we didn't have that opportunity because it happened so fast.
Yeah.
On the Tuesday night, my brother stayed, and then from Wednesday, Thursday, she just slept, and my mum's older brother came up to see my mum, and she did wake up to see my auntie and my uncle for a moment. And Craig and myself also on the Wednesday were able to go to our doctor and get a little video of the little one, the jelly bean, which was so lovely. So my mum actually woke up to watch the video, and then fell back asleep from there. So wait for a short amount of time. And then Friday the 9th of November, I was awake early. My dad was awake early. It would have been about 5 a.m. And I came out to the lounge room, and I was talking to my dad, and, we were just talking about things. And then we got a phone call about 5 to 6 in the morning, and the nurses had called from palliative care saying, come quickly, your mum is going to pass away. I spoke to my dad. My dad hopped in the car immediately. We were only, as I said, a couple of minutes away. I woke up my brother, because he lives at home, and woke up my husband. My little brother got into the car, and while I'm about to leave the house, my dad called to say that my mum had passed, and he was so upset because he missed her passing. But we think that's her decision. She didn't want any of us being with her. The nurses were with her, but I think she didn't want to give that burden to my dad or to us. I hopped in the car with Craig, and we came up to the hospital, and we were let in straight away and able to see my mum. And I had to, when someone passes, they're still present, they're still there, they're still even though mum wasn't breathing, she looked like she was sleeping, and she was so at peace. And I could hold her hand and she was still warm.
Yeah.
And we as a family were able to talk to her and be with her.
Yeah.
So even though we weren't there for her last minutes, it doesn't matter, because we were with her. She was still, her energy was still in the room.
Yeah.
And then I had to make a phone call to my older brother, because her and his wife and the children live a little bit away from my parents. So I had to call him to say that we'd called him to tell him that you need to come quickly. And then I called him to say that if you and his wife can come down, mum's passed away. And then I called also my auntie and uncle, because they'd come up to Brisbane.
Yeah.
And I had to tell them the news.
Yeah.
So, it was hard to tell them. It was hard to say it, but then at least we were all able to say goodbye to my mum as she was just asleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a hard thing is when you walk out of the hospital, your world stops when you lose a parent, and especially a parent you're so close with. Like, my mum was just my everything, your best friend. Like, my brothers and me, we both say that our mum would move mountains for us if she could. Your biggest cheerleader, the person who loves you unconditionally, that if anything happened, she would be there to support you and lift you back up. That was my mum.
Yeah.
And when you walked out of the hospital that day, the world didn't stop. And that was really hard. That you just think, just for a second, the world should stop for you and for your mum, because she is the most strongest, beautiful woman who did everything.
Yeah.
But we weren't able to cure it, the cancer. So that was a real eye-opener, to the first time of really losing a person who the world should stop for, and it doesn't.
Yeah. It's like there should be that acknowledgement. We just acknowledge this moment. Definitely.
And I've lost my grandparents, but losing a parent is it's completely different. And it's especially if you're close to that person, or to the one who's supposed to be there that you want to look after and protect, and they look after and protect you.
Yeah.
You look at the world completely different from that day.
Yeah. Grief is just, it's forever in your life then, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So it was very hard, but at the same time, I needed to make sure I was there for my dad. And at the same time, Craig and myself spoke that we needed to look after my little one. I was 15 weeks pregnant when my mum passed, 14 to 15 weeks pregnant. And my doctor, my OB-GYN, knew everything what was happening.
Yeah.
There was no problems or anything, but I needed to make sure that I was staying on top and making sure I was trying to be as calm as possible in the situation, and letting all my emotions out safely.
Yeah.
The week coming up to my mum's funeral, I went with my dad to the funeral home to prepare and do as my mum wishes, and prepare the funeral, or organise the funeral. And at the same time, my mum's friends came down to say their condolences, who were just beautiful ladies. And my relatives all came up to Brisbane to be here for mum's funeral. Mum's funeral was the 16th of November, and my mum's birthday is the 16th of November. So my mum was 66 on the 9th, but she was going to be turning 67. So my mum passed away when she was 66. But my dad and myself thought, when they said the day, the 16th of November, which was the following Friday, we thought it's meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Still celebrating her life.
Exactly. And that was the really important part, that it was celebrating. Yes, my mum was only 66, and that is so young.
Very, yeah.
But her family was everything she wanted, and she fought so hard. So I wanted to make sure that her service was beautiful and respectful and a legacy for her, to honor her.
Yeah.
So it was very surreal for a funeral service to be getting condolences about my mum, but at the same time from my family members who hadn't seen Craig and myself to say congratulations on starting your family.
Yeah.
So that was a very surreal day that we had to do it. And Craig and myself decided to keep staying in my parents' house for a little while longer while my dad was grieving, while we were grieving, and just to be close to my mum.
Yeah. Yeah.
So throughout this, we've had a very normal pregnancy. We hadn't found out the sex of the baby because of everything going on with my mum.
Yeah.
But we had a feeling it was a girl.
Yeah.
So we were always calling her and saying Jellybean. And my mum's initials is JB, just like Jellybean. So it was just so many fitting things.
Yeah. Yeah.
When my mum passed, Craig and myself discussed that we will find out at the 20-week scan what we're having. At that time, we hadn't decided if we were going to find out or not. And I just wanted to focus all my energy and love to my little one.
Yeah.
And subconsciously know my mum was doing the same thing. I could feel her energy. I could hear her doing all this. So I knew I had to protect my little one.
Yeah.
Then for our 20-week scan, we were very fortunate. We had a beautiful lady who looked after us, and I had let her know that I had lost my mum, so I will be very sensitive.
Yeah.
This is our first baby. Craig and myself are starting our family. We want you to check everything from A to Z. There's not been anything, but we want to make sure everything's right. And the lady was, when we were about to do gender, she asked Craig and myself, are you sure you want to know? And we said yes. And she said, we're having a baby girl. And I remember Craig, like screamed in excitement. And I just thought, it's just meant to be. My mum knew we were having a baby girl, and I'm the only girl in my family. So it was just perfect. It was just, I knew we were going to have a baby girl, and it just happened like that, which was lovely.
Yeah, that's so special.
And then after our 20-week appointment, Craig had said to me that we had already had a girl name picked out since we've been engaged. Funnily enough, we heard a name before, and we'd always thought we were going to have girls. So we already had a first name for our little one, but we hadn't had a middle name. And at that time, and Craig, after our 20-week appointment, said, I would love to have her middle name to be Judith, which is my mum's name. So we call her Judy, but her real name is Judith. And I just was so over the moon that Craig would be that beautiful to me. And it's so respectful for my mum. And she would feel so honored that our little one's middle name is Judith.
Well,
and we
she
were so happy
sounded like
about
a
that.
very special lady that needed to be honored in that way.
Yeah, it was perfect, absolutely perfect. And we thought, yes, so we had we had our little one's name, and we told, I think we told people that we were having a baby girl. Don't know for sure, to be honest, if we said it with everything else going on.
Yeah.
And we just kept going to appointments and everything, and nothing happening, and we just thinking, how are we going to start our family? What do we need to do? Started buying all the items, etc.
Yeah.
And then around the 26-week mark, I'd felt that our little one, Jellybean, just felt different. The movements were different. And I made an appointment with our OBGYN, and I came in, and I saw his offsider. There's two, and there's, so his offsider was on. And she was really good. She was really calm my nerves. She said that your little girl, she was horizontal, and now she's moved to be vertical. This is why you're feeling less movement. I said, okay, it's fine. I understood. I also understood how much I was dealing with. It's only been 2 months since my mum's passing.
Yeah.
There's a lot taking in every day.
Very raw at that point.
Yes.
You're still comprehending life.
Exactly.
In this completely new context.
Exactly. And your focus is on your little one. and I can feel her kicking, I can feel everything. So when there's a change, I didn't, and it's our first, so I didn't know why or when to ask questions, but I knew to make sure to go in for an appointment. So that was no problems whatsoever. Then the week after, for our 27-week appointment, I was starting to feel the same things again. So again, I reached out and went in for a scan. And again, no problems. Everything was checked. Exactly the same. It's just because little one is vertical. So I said, okay. And then we then had our normal 28-week appointment, which was Tuesday, the 19th of February. And we went in for our appointment, and I had said to Craig that I'm feeling decreased movement, but we've been to the doctors. We understand it's just because of her positioning. Unfortunately, we're not able to feel her as much. So before that point, realistically, it was only myself saying this. There wasn't anything behind it when you looked at any ultrasounds, etc. And then so we saw my doctor and beautiful OB/GYN, and I said to him, I'm feeling less movement. I haven't felt movement, but I know the office has been saying that it's just because of her position. He said, no problems, Dana. We'll go in and we'll make sure we calm your nerves. I said, excellent. So he went in and he brought up the ultrasound or the sonogram, and I knew something was wrong because of how she looked. I could see she wasn't moving. And he just looked at me, the doctor, and he was very shocked because he was very surprised because he wasn't expecting it. And he just said to us that your little baby girl has no heartbeat. And I know I was in shock. I didn't say anything. But I remember Craig going, can we get her out? Can we have her? And I remember the doctor saying to us, she's already passed away. And I think I was so shocked because of everything going on that I could not believe life can be so cruel, that your one hope is taken away also. I couldn't believe it that could happen, that you could lose your mum, but then you lose your only chance of happiness. That was so difficult for us because it had been just under 3 months. And there was no warning. There was no reason.
And everything you've been talking about was just so perfect, wasn't it?
Yes.
Mum being able to hear the news, your mum having this intuition that she was the girl that was coming to the family.
And that's the hard thing. It's it was meant to be our hope, our happiness, but life can be cruel. And then so our OB/GYN had said, I realized, of course, I would have to be having her naturally. And he said that he would contact us the next day and book me in with the hospital. And then Craig and myself had to go to my parents' house to break the news to my dad and my brother. And then we had to go to Craig's parents' house to break the news to his parents and his brothers. And it's another blow to yourself when you don't have your mum, because that's all you wanted. All I wanted was my mum, just to say everything's gonna be okay, or to hold my hand. And I didn't have that. That was really, really hard. Craig, my husband, is absolutely amazing, but he's impacted as well. Like, he's dealing with all of this grief as well. Exactly. And it was very difficult. My husband, he was so good. He told my dad. My dad, of course, was grieving so much for my mum and still is. And I went into my bedroom where I previously was staying, and Craig had to tell my dad. And then I went out after Craig had said, and my dad was beautiful, and he just hugged me and he said he wished mum was there. And I said, I know, I wish Mum was here. And then I had to explain to him that we'll be having our little girl. And then that night we went home to Craig's parents' house, and we also had to tell his parents. And his parents were so beautiful. They were completely in shock again because no one realized, no one knew. We didn't have any warning signs for us.
Mm.
So then the next day we slept, and then the next day I got a call from the doctor, and I'd said we can to go into hospital check-in on the 21st. So the next day. So Tuesday we had the normal 28-week scan, and I was 28 weeks and 2 days then. And then on the Thursday, we went into hospital, and he, the most amazing OBGYN, was so respectful and so beautiful. He said, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Yes, I'm ready, to go into the hospital." And he said he'd walk us through the whole step. And in his practice also is a midwife, Jackie, and she was beautiful. So Craig and myself packed to know that the next morning we'd be checking in at 6 a.m. So it was the same hospital. So my OBGYN works at the same hospital that where my mum was.
Yeah.
So the private hospital. So I had to, Wednesday night, we went back and stayed in my parents' house as they lived just around the corner.
Yeah.
And went into the same hospital where my mum had passed 3 months prior.
Yeah.
Not on the same level, at least, but we know the hospital very well. And so we checked in at 6 a.m. and remarkably, I'd realised when my mum passed, before entering, there was a butterfly on the door.
Mm.
And when we arrived at the hospital, when we were being checked into our room, there was a butterfly on the door.
Mm.
So I find it really beautiful, butterflies, because it's a sign of respect to know that something's happening behind those closed doors, that only the right people or the professionals should be entering.
Mm.
So we checked in at 6 a.m. and then at 7 a.m. Our OBGYN and a midwife arrived and had explained to us that they're going to start to induce me. It can take a few days, it can take a day, etc. It just depends on you, because my body wasn't doing it naturally.
Yeah.
And that if there's anything I need to let them know. And they dropped off paperwork, which was very daunting.
Mm.
But he was so good, our doctor. He said, "Dana and Craig, just read this part for now. Read the next part after the next process for us."
Yeah.
At the same time, then we had the midwife from the hospital come in, and she had said that she will be with us the whole day.
Okay.
Only she will enter the room, and she will organise a bed for Craig so he can stay the whole time, that she will bring our food in, etc. And my room location, even though it was on the maternity ward, like level, my room actually was on the opposite side, was where all the adults were who have surgeries. Okay. So I did not hear anything, which was the best thing. Yeah,
because you hear, I've heard some stories where it's not that respectful.
Yes. Yeah, I cannot, and Craig cannot speak highly enough how understanding and respectful and professional they were.
Good. Yeah.
And terribly to say I wasn't there first, because you could tell that I wasn't the first person who was going to have a stillborn. That they understood, and they were so beautiful, absolutely so beautiful to us.
Yeah, good.
So she was really beautiful, the first midwife. She told us about herself, and then she walked us through the paperwork so it wouldn't be as daunting. And at the same time, we talked to her about, as I was only 28 weeks, I was going to the week after have our birthing classes. Yeah. So Craig and myself hadn't gone through any birthing classes, and this was our first. So she was really lovely to go ask us the question, did I want to have the little one in the bedroom, like in the room we were at, or in the maternity ward? I decided the maternity ward because I wanted to change the space and thought that was more of a professional, the right place to have it. But she said, you always have choices.
Yeah.
So throughout the day, she would come in, check on me, and my OBGYN would come in every 4 hours to continue the drugs to start the inducing. And at 4 p.m. he came in and said, okay, Dana, we're going to stop the drugs now so you can have a good night's sleep, and we start tomorrow. I said, no problems. So he went home from the night, and about 6 o'clock, I said to Craig,
PM.
that PM, yes. So 2 hours later, I said to Craig, I'm feeling more than period cramps. I need you to call the nurse, and we'll call the midwife. And we'd had at the 4 p.m. we'd had a changeover of a new midwife. And again, she told me her story about herself, asked about Craig and my story, understood what we wanted, and again said one step at a time. So I called her in, and I remember quite instinctively she said to me that she'd be able to tell if I was in labor. And I said, I'm starting to feel definitely that I'm starting to be in labor, even though I've never experienced it before. And she checked me and she goes, oh, you're a quietativa, aren't you? You're fully dilated. And I went,
oh my God,
thank you. And at this time, no drugs. And I was like, oh, okay, and I was like, so what's the next step? Not like, Craig and myself going, what's the next step? And she said, okay, we're going to go, I'm going to call the OBGYN, your doctor, back. You just wait here. I was like, yep, no problems. At this time, I hadn't had contractions. I just was starting to feel things were progressing. Craig and myself make a joke that poor Craig he'd made the bed for himself in the night because he was on the ground, and he just was about to pop the red wine to give himself a nightcap to fall asleep for the night, because that's what we were told, that we're going to have to sleep the night. And we were trying not to, it was a very emotional day. We were trying not to think about it. And we thought, okay, that's what we're doing. And I didn't even allow him to have a drink, because I was like, and then about half an hour later, I said, Craig, you have to call her again. We're starting, like we're really moving along. So, and at that time, I remember I was like, I need to go to the bathroom. I'm not dressed for this. I'm not ready. Like, what's happening? So she came back in. She said she's called our doctor, and we'll just wait and see what your body's going to tell you. And then about 8 o'clock, I remember I said, Craig, you need to call her again. It is time. We need to start the movement. And she came back in. She's like, okay, I'm going to move you to the maternity ward, or to the, maternity room. And I'm going to call the doctor again. I said, okay, fine. So Craig, beautifully, he was like, what do you want me to carry? I had already bought clothes for our little one, like an outfit to bring home prior to anything knowing. Just I'd bought special little pink outfit for her. So I said to Craig, can you bring the pink outfit, please? And I think he brought a bottle of water for himself and myself. I think that's as much as we knew what to bring with us. And we had to walk down the long corridor. Fortunately, is it because I was in so much pain? But I heard nothing. Fortunately, we went past the maternity ward. We went to the maternity rooms. But the midwives had said to me that I'm the only one in labor. And they closed the door, and I was in the room, and we're like, okay, good. So it was about 8 o'clock at this time. And she said to me that, don't start pushing yet, as the doctor's not here. And I was like, how do we stop this? And breathing. And I was like, okay. And of course I missed out on all the drugs because I was already in this position. So I was like, well, here we are.
Yeah.
So I was like, rightio then. So we just sort of breathed through it until my OBGYN arrived, and also my midwife from the practice actually came too, which was really lovely of her. But she didn't have to come because there was already other midwives there. So then we started pushing, and at 10:53 p.m. Aria was born, and she was born silent, but there was so much love in the room. Craig and me can't describe that. Even though we were knowing she'd passed away, she was still ours. And it was a difference of a mood of you're having a baby until our baby's here, our little girl, our family has begun. And when she was born, we didn't see her straight away. Our OBGYN took her and said he's going to check her, he's going to weigh her, etc. And the midwife stayed with me, and Craig then followed her, which I always asked him to follow her to make sure, don't leave our daughter's side.
Yeah.
And so after a little while, Craig came back in, and he had seen Aria, and he had said, that he would like to bring her back in for me. And I said yes. And the midwives had prepared us in case we were shocked about a little one being on the 28 weeks, what they were going to look like.
Yeah.
I had no idea what she was going to look like. But then when she walked back in, or not she walked, but when she was back into the cot, she was born perfect, small, petite, but very feminine. She had long fingernails or long fingers, long toes, little button nose. She was just so beautiful and sleeping.
Yeah.
There was no pain. It was just a sleeping little baby.
Yeah.
My OBGYN walked back in and said that he can't see any reason why this happened.
Yeah.
And in future found out that ours is described as like an undiagnosed reason why she passed. The only thing he can come with is that she passed within the last 36 hours.
Yeah.
And she passed in her sleep. So ours is explained like SIDS.
Yeah.
But in the stomach, because there was no reason. She was small, but that was the perfect size for 28 weeks.
Yeah.
So there's no, for us, there was no answers. She was she was 940 grams and 36 centimeters long. So perfect for what she was. And she was just I said, like Craig and myself just say she was just so beautiful.
Yeah.
And they wrapped her up in the exact same outfit, had the same thing as all babies are, which was so respectful and in the cot for us.
Yeah.
And then before we went back to the room, we had a new midwife arrive, and she was so lovely. And she said, "Would you allow me to dress your daughter?" And I had the outfit, and I said yes. And I had a little bow headband, and unfortunately her head was too small for that. So instead they put on this beautiful little pink preemie little beanie on her and the little outfit that I had provided. And she said, "Would you like to have handprints and fingerprints?" And I was like, yes, definitely. And I was in shock. I don't remember if I was crying or not. I don't remember if Craig and myself were. I think we were just so protective of her, keeping her close to us. But the midwives were so beautiful and respectful to us to ask permission. And then a midwife asked me, "Would you like her to sleep in the room with you? Because we're going to take you back to the room." And I said, "Oh, am I allowed that?" We hadn't read that. We didn't realize.
Yeah.
And she said, yes. She said, "It's really important. You can have her in the room with you. We'll have her all dressed nicely for you, and then she can come back into the room with you."
Yeah.
And that was so beautiful. I did not realize how much I needed that until I was leaving the room and she was still there in the maternity room itself.
So when were you able to hold her?
We never were able to hold her because she was so small, but we were able to touch her. So after I delivered her and she came back, I was able to rub her back. Yeah. I was able to hold her hand. I was able to touch her face. But Craig and myself, in the sense, we didn't want to, because she was so small in that, we didn't want to, not break her is the right word, but she just looked so peaceful because she was sleeping that we didn't want to disturb her. Yeah. So she was just, it's so weird to say, but she was just literally sleeping in a position to her side. Yeah. So her head was to the side, her hands were out, her feet were out, and I could just rub her back.
Yeah.
So we didn't push to ask to hold her.
Yeah.
And I don't look back and think, should I have held her? Because she just was so peaceful for us. So we could just touch her.
And having known you, you're so intuitive that if that's what you needed, you would have asked.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Definitely Craig and myself look and go, we should, like, if we felt we needed it, I think we would have.
Yeah.
But how well they were at the hospital and how well they looked after us and what they were saying and what we could see, you just knew that she was just happy in her position.
Yeah.
So we just left her in her position because, as I said, she came out on her side in the sense. So she was just like this, sleeping to her side. So we just wanted to let her be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then we went back after I was cleaned up, went back to the room. I was very fortunate, natural birth, no injuries, tears, etc. So went back to the room, and then I did laugh. Craig started preparing himself for bed, typical husband. And at the same time, I was like, yep. And we were just chatting to each other and just waiting for Aria to come back into the room. So we did, when we had Aria, we told our OBGYN before she was born, her name was going to be Aria Judith Hynd. So we'd already said, so they knew already that. And when she was being born, I remember my midwife just saying, Aria's coming, Aria's coming. So it was just, we already knew what her name was going to be and what we were going to call her. And Aria means lioness. So we just thought, very fitting. She's a fighter. She was there for me through all my grief for my mom.
Yeah.
Through the hardest parts to get me through the rawness and the hardship.
Yeah.
So we call her the little lioness that way.
Yeah.
And then she was able to, that night she stayed with us. So I had her at 10:53 and I would have said about 1 a.m. she came back into the room.
Yeah.
And I can never describe how peaceful, like Craig and myself both say that Craig was sleeping to my left, she was on my right, and she was in the same cot that every baby has, just in a cold cot, dressed exactly how we wanted her. And I could see her, I could touch her, and we had the most peaceful sleep because our family was whole. We felt, even though I know she'd passed, we knew that, but she was our daughter and we were protecting her and she was with us the whole time.
Yeah.
And we really needed her to be with us. And then the next morning we woke up, I think about 6 a.m. So we'd only had a few hours sleep. Yeah. And Craig and myself decided that we wanted to take photos for just ourselves of her. And we decided that everything going on emotionally, we couldn't handle having our parents or my dad or brothers or Craig's parents or his brothers coming up. So we just wanted to be just ourselves. Yeah. Everyone was very respectful of that, understood, but we just wanted to have our time with Aria as only our emotions, as we could not have any more emotions on us. It was just, that was enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a healthy boundary to set and protect.
Yes.
So, I think some people might feel pressured because, yes, the rest of the family is grieving, but this is your, like, for you, like, it's so immediate.
Yeah. So we were able to share with my parents or with my dad and with Craig's parents her name and say we had Aria Judith Hynd at 10:53 p.m, 940 grams, 36 centimeters length, and her name, means is after my mum, and Aria as lioness. So it was so beautiful. We're able to send out. We haven't shared the photos; it's just for ourselves. But we wanted to. But we have shown like the fingerprints, the footprints, etc.
Yeah.
And that morning, around lunchtime, the midwife came in who we had the day before. So we had 3 midwives, and then the same one started again. Yeah. And she came in and so respectful, said, I've heard, you've had your little baby girl. What's her name? And had said, the next thing is your doctor's going to come in to talk about the next step, which was the paperwork for funeral service, etc. Yeah. And she said that in time, if you allow me, I will take your daughter to the next part, to which will be the mortuary. I forget what she called. She called it something very, very, like very respectful, like a cold room. And she said that if we wanted, they could have, as it's a Catholic private hospital, that we could get a nun come in to do a blessing for Aria, as we would have had her baptized. And I was like, yes, we definitely want that. So we had that organised. And then, as I said, around lunchtime, our doctor came in to sign me out, my OB-GYN, and he'd said in the next couple of days he'll be in contact, and to take, because that was the Friday, take the weekend for yourselves.
Yeah.
And then on the Monday you can call who you need to call to organise, etc.
Yeah.
And I said there were so many hard things, but the hardest of them all, and it's so obvious, but the realization that Aria has to be taken away from me was, my midwife, she came in, and as I said, she had told me, but that was just gut-wrenching to know. And I know she can't stay with me. I knew it, but
that's the rational, logical brain, and then the rest of it is the emotional brain. It's there, like you can't deny that.
Yeah, it's just, you're so protective, like, you know, Aria existed. She passed, but she existed, and she's mine, and she's my daughter, and she's our, you know, like Craig and me say, she made us mum and dad. Like, we are mum and daddy because of her.
Yeah.
We are who we are because of her. Yeah. And so it's just, that was really, really hard to explain to people, that you leave the hospital without the baby. Your body's telling you you've had a baby. You've
grown a baby,
your family, everything, and you have to leave without a baby. And as I said, the midwife was beautiful, and she, you know, she respectfully, and I know she got upset because she saw I was upset, but it's just it was a very difficult thing to leave the hospital without her.
Yeah.
And then we went back to my parents' house to stay the weekend there, just so we could be still close to Aria, as we were only just down the road. We were allowed, if we wanted to come back, but we decided, no, let's let her be.
Yeah.
And that we would start organising the next steps, etc.
Yeah.
Yes. And then, I said it to Craig. I remember saying to him, I can't believe in 3 months planning 2 funeral services is just not, it's not something you can imagine. And losing a parent is like your compass, your direction, your rock is gone. But losing a child is so cruel and immeasurable, and you can't explain it to people how much your heart breaks, and that you have to then organize their service is just, wow. It was a lot. We both, again, we were so lucky. We had beautiful funeral service people, director, and the funeral service director then explained to us or let us know where different cemeteries were. And we wanted to pick, one, we wanted her to be buried, but 2, we wanted to pick a place close to us, so myself and Craig could visit her all the time. And at the same time, we wanted her to be with other babies. And so only 5 minutes from where we live is a beautiful cemetery memorial, where there is a beautiful baby garden, which is just, it sounds bizarre, but it's a very peaceful place, very respectful place. And when we started talking to that director in that place, we knew this is meant to be.
Yeah.
So we had organised with the funeral director things we could put in with Aria into her coffin. So we had a beautiful photo album that Craig had made for me for, it was either a wedding anniversary or, no, it must have been just our anniversary. And it was about our story of how it's been together. And we thought Mummy and Daddy have to be in there. So we had that. We had a cross of my mum's. We gave that to Aria. We also had like the jelly bean poster, sonograms, a little jelly bean that Craig got me. We asked my dad and Craig's parents so all the grandparents to write a letter to Aria,
Beautiful.
and that went in also.
Yeah.
And we had we'd already, because we were so far along, we'd bought so much. So we gave her a bunny that we'd bought that was, for her.
Yes.
And we were able to have that all with her. Additionally, I'm sure it's called angel gowns through my OBGYN, organised gowns for little girls or boys, but girls of old wedding dresses, so that they can dress in little white gowns. And so she dressed in that above the outfit I already had for Aria, which I really love. And we got a little angel charm Swarovski, and Ari had one and I have one in my room.
Yeah.
And then we also have a teddy bear with the bow, the headband that I'd got in the outfit, that also we were able to keep with us.
Yeah.
So I was able to keep those parts for us. So the next 2 weeks we'd organize the service, and we wanted to make sure that we were respecting and really making the most beautiful service for Aria, but also accepting what our boundaries are for Craig and myself. And we'd asked only Craig and myself were there for her funeral service, because we could not take on anyone else's emotions.
No.
And I'm so glad we did. And, yes, it's hard that unfortunately my parents, or my dad, my brothers, Craig's parents and his brothers and family and our friends weren't able to be there for the service, but everyone completely understood that we needed just to be us in that much grief and darkness, just to be able to focus on Craig and myself, and to be able to hold each other and not be influenced or affected by anyone else's emotions. And not that anyone would try to do that, it's just that you could feel it in the energy that that's what we needed. So we were able to pick the songs that we wanted and have the service we wanted with the funeral director and the other funeral director of the memorial park itself. And it was intimate, but it was perfect. It was just so beautiful, and we were able to share Aria with ourselves and share just the experience. Just to have our little daughter with us was just so loving to have. So yeah.
And that's where everyone's going to deal with grief in their own way. I imagine if your mother had been around, then she would have been part of that.
Yes.
And that's where it's so personal, and each of those decisions is so individual. And I think that's what's so important about sharing stories like this as well, is that your story could be giving permission for someone else to go, actually, no, we want it this way, and that's okay.
Yep, definitely. And I think was something like, Craig and myself joke, because my mum is such a strong woman, that if I had said to her when I was having Aria that you can't come up to the hospital and meet your granddaughter, she was already there, probably dressed as a midwife. Let's be honest. Like she would already be at the door going, hello. Craig and me make the joke all the time. Yes, that she would intuitively know what I need and be like, Craig, yes, you are the husband. However, I'm the mother and I will be there. So we do make the joke but it's so true, because I couldn't have mum. It just wasn't the same. And Craig and me, I was able to, we say about when I lost my mum, I was able to lean on so much of Craig that I trusted him wholeheartedly, and I trust him wholeheartedly now. And he's been through this whole journey with me that I knew was only needed us to get through the next stage when we were going through with Aria. So setting that boundary was quite hard to say to the grandparents in that sense. But they understood at the same time that my mum was only service was only two and a bit months before that. So it was just so raw and so obvious that we just needed time to just be with each other.
Dana, you're one of the most amazingly strong women I've ever met, to be able to still stand after everything you went through. So what do you think got you through it?
I think being really honest with how I felt or how I feel, really open and kind to my soul and gentle to my soul, that it's okay how I was feeling. It's normal for how you're feeling. I think you explained that grief, you're supposed to get over it, and you don't get over it. You learn to cope with it and you learn to live with it every day, and you honor the people who you've lost or with every day in your own unique and special way.
Yeah.
I think really importantly, I'm not so fortunate, but I am so fortunate. My husband, Craig, we have such an honest and open communication and relationship that from the beginning, from losing my mom, he was full protective of me and our baby, making sure that everything was fine. He was at every appointment and making sure that everything was going smoothly and I was looked after.
Yeah.
And even though I was at the hospital with mum every night, he was either there or we'd meet at home, etc., in our house, looking after me. So then when I lost mum, he was more protective of me, and we were able to start having those honest conversations from the beginning then about how we're feeling.
Yeah.
So when we lost Aria, we knew we had to rely on each other. We knew we had to tell each other how we were feeling. We knew we were grieving differently, but the same. And understanding that part in the beginning was hard. But then when Craig would tell our story when we met up with our friends. Craig made sure he wanted to tell Aria's story to each person. I wasn't strong enough to say it, to be honest. It was such a hard story to tell, but we wanted to share our birthing story to everyone.
Yeah.
And he was there and I was there and he held my hand, and how he would tell it would be so beautiful and such a proud dad. And I knew that even though as a mom, I had her kicking me. I innately missed having a baby in my hands. He was there to support me, and we were able to listen to each other and be honest to how we were feeling each day and what were our triggers.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important from the beginning, that you need to know that. I know we did go see a grief counselor together, and he from the beginning said he doesn't, which I was just like, wow. He said to me that he was blaming himself and I was blaming myself, because when you have a stillborn, it's you feel it's your body. And he felt he wasn't protecting me enough.
Wow.
And it was just that honest conversation from the beginning to know that we're both feeling this, but the grief counselor explained it, that things are out of our control in life.
Yeah.
And that blame is not helping the situation, it's just hurting the situation. So, that we were really fortunate that we had those honest conversations from the beginning, that we could go, okay, what will blame do for us? So we were able to really be, as I said, honest to say, okay, that's not going to help for us. I know definitely sharing, like I find really, it is a hard conversation when people ask me how many children I have, but if I don't recognize Aria, I feel like that, you have to recognize, because she existed. She's not physically here, but she existed, and she's the reason I'm here today, and how our life, and we've had a beautiful rainbow baby, and we say Aria gave us Lucas. She had to be a part of it for us to have Lucas. And every day when I look at Lucas and I see him, I feel that. And when we go to see Aria all the time, we bring Lucas to the baby garden, and I feel her energy, and I feel that she's with us, and I know she's looking out for him. So that's really just being gentle and kind to yourself, and is how you go through.
Yeah, definitely. I know it's getting late, so I won't keep you for much longer.
That's right.
But just a couple of last questions. What's the biggest insight you've got from this whole journey that you've been on, that I think you've partly shared it, but I never like to assume that you feel you've, I guess, gained from it, because that you have lost so much, and there's no denying that. We acknowledge that, but because you are still here and you've got a life to go on with, your mother to Lucas now, and it's about honoring Aria and your mother every day. But what's the biggest insight that's helped you to keep going?
I think that is it is life. There is still a purpose in life, and that you can look at this, that you can, of course, you go through waves of emotions all the times, but there is still life, there is still purpose, there is still love, there's still joy, there's still laughter. And I more try to think I'm a legacy for my mum. I want to honor her. And Aria made me a mum. Aria made Craig a dad. So we want to honor her every day. The biggest insight is, and it sounds so, it's something so normal but so real, that life is precious. And until you've lost, you don't realize how precious life can be.
Yeah.
I think that's Craig and myself say, we just did not realize.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
That's all right.
For sharing your whole story with us tonight. And there is so much heartbreak in your story, without a doubt. But I know when I first met you, well, nearly 2 years ago, actually, I loved working with you to help you be ready to welcome Lucas. And as I said, just always very impressed and admired how strong you are. So thank you for being strong and sharing your story tonight, and being so real and raw. I think that's so important, and I really appreciate you doing that for us tonight as well. And Dana will be back with the other ladies who are speaking and being interviewed through October. On Wednesday, the 27th of October, I'll be holding a women's circle on Zoom. And if you or someone you know has experienced pregnancy or infant loss, you're most welcome to join us. And Dana and the other ladies will be able to answer any questions you've got of their experience or your experience. And I'm really creating this as a space because I don't think there's enough spaces available for us to be able to sit in this type of conversation and be okay with it, and really honor that these stories exist. Miscarriages, that 1 in 4 women experience miscarriage. And we were talking before we started recording, I have my IVF story, and whenever I mention it, it opens the door for other people to go, oh, actually, this was my story. And you were saying how just in your small swimming group, how many women who experienced a similar story. So they do exist. And unfortunately, a lot of people feel uncomfortable with them, but it's reality. It's the real world. And I think, I'm providing that space for us to have these conversations. So thank you for being part of it.
Thank you.
And I will see you in a few weeks.
See you soon, Belinda.
Thank you.
Thank you.